Okay, if that's everyone we're expecting, shall we make a start, colleagues? Good morning, welcome to our June Audit Committee meeting. Are there any apologies?
No apologies.
Okay, are there any declarations of interest in relation to any items on today's agenda? I'm seeing shaking of heads, so we should be fine. Okay, can we move then to the minute of our last meeting of 5th of March? I'll run through it first for accuracy. Anything on what in the papers is page 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7. Can we take that as an accurate record then? Are there any matters arising that don't fall elsewhere in the agenda today? I didn't have anything. Nope. Okay, item 4 then is the Strategic Risk Register. Gillian, are you taking us through this one?
Yeah, thanks, Gordon. So the paper is a regular standing agenda item and it presents an update on the Strategic Risk Register. There's been no new risks added to the register since the last report that was presented at committee, but 2 risks have been removed and we'll touch on that in a minute. So that means there's 9 live risks at the moment, 7 of which are considered to be high risk, 2 of which are considered to be medium. Members of the committee will note that the detailed risk register hasn't been included in the report this time, and that's because we're reviewing the layout and the content of the detailed strategic risk register in conjunction with the senior leadership team. I would ask you to turn to section 4 of the report, which provides a summary of the risk register. And as you can see under section 4.2, following discussion at a workshop with the senior leadership team, 2 risks have been removed. So that was the risk in relation to directions, and there's a number of reasons for that. One, there's statutory guidance now issued back in January, in fact, by Scottish Government. We also have a directions policy that's been approved, and as part of that policy, we've agreed that the directions will be regularly reviewed and monitored in terms of compliance and progress by our strategic planning group. So it was felt that actually that was probably more of an issue than a risk as such. So we've removed it. But obviously, as I say, if it's been reviewed by the strategic planning group and there are any issues, we will escalate it to this group as appropriate. The other risk that's been removed, it's actually been merged. So transition of operational management of NHS services to partnerships. The strategic leadership, the leadership group agreed that we would merge that with risk 8. It was felt there was quite a bit of overlap and duplication there. Both risks were essentially about whole systems transformation. So we thought we would actually merge them together. So that will be reported in the new detailed risk register that will come back to this group. At Appendix 1 in the report, I've provided a note of the workshop that was held on the 21st of April with the senior leadership team. It was a really good session facilitated by myself and Andrew Gibson and Hugh Coyle, who are the Council's and NHS Forth Valley's corporate risk managers. And a number of actions came out of that workshop. So we undertook a cross-reference check, if you like, to the risk registers of the partners, just for kind of read across. We removed the 2 risks that I've just referred to. There was a unanimous agreement on a few of the risks. It won't surprise you to know that the funding and demographic change, everybody agreed was still a risk and should remain on the register. But for a lot of the other ones, it was agreed that while some of them were risks in terms of that kind of headings that they have, how they had been articulated and worded in the risk register maybe needed to change. So there's a piece of work ongoing with the lead officers to update that wording. And as I say, we're also looking at the format and the layout of the actual risk register, and we'll bring that back to the September meeting of this committee. In terms of the recommendations of the report then, the committee is asked to note the high-level summary strategic risk register that's presented at 4.2, and also just to note that work that's underway at the moment in terms of the format and the content of the actual detailed risk register. And I'm happy to take any questions at this point.
Thanks, Gillian. That all sounds good to me. I think having something that is more in line with partners' risk approach certainly makes a lot of sense. And there looks like a lot of good work in that session. Alison?
Yeah, I like the new layout. I like the new format. For me, the workshop, I was a bit concerned that it was light on clinicians and, you know, like from health. And I think it's really important that they're sitting around the table when we're talking about risk. There was quite a lot of apologies put in that day. Page staffing, obviously. I mean, the risks are identified and they're well known, but the staffing is a huge issue, recruitment and retention. And we know that some care companies are under real pressure with recruitment, etc. And I think that probably needs to be looked at in our procurement processes, which again is identified as a significant risk. I think it really is a big risk. I mean, Patricia spoke at the last IGB about how difficult it was for the IGB to recruit staff, because people had more options now that lockdown was reducing. And I think people in care have evaluated their lives, and many people who have been caring over the last year under extremely difficult circumstances have thought to themselves, well, it's maybe not for me now. And I know that in my own personal life, my son's care company is experiencing those types of issues. So the risks are well identified, but as I say, and during the tendering process, if there's anything that can be done to try and mitigate some of those risks, and to take cognizance that some of the people that are being looked after with more complex needs, there's a even more serious risk, you know, retention, etc. I think the primary care risk again reflects the real pressures that are going on in GP surgeries, and it's having a negative impact on patients. And I think some of those are the difficulties in actually getting an appointment, getting through, and the difficulties in people understanding what the new primary care contract means, and that they're actually probably getting a better service in a lot of ways. And again, we really need to make sure that message gets across, because the message isn't getting across still. So I think there's a bit of work to be done there. And then HR policies, I think we need to look at that. I mean, in the risk register before, every month, every time it came to audit, it was identified that we were waiting for this is just one example, we were waiting for a senior person in the ADP from the council side. And what happened was our HR team put more weight, just every council's different, but our HR team put more weight on teams and how many staff you have in a team rather than professional competence. And for the IGB, I think that's a particular risk, because we maybe have smaller teams, we have individuals who have a lot of expertise, and that's really important when we're recruiting, and we need to make sure that we're up there with everybody else, able to recruit the best people, you know, with the best qualifications and the most experience. So I think that is a risk. Still, although it's obviously the way we do the risk register's changed.
Thanks, Alison. There was quite a few points in that. I'll come back on. That's all right. In terms of the apologies, yeah, you're absolutely right. A Wednesday's a difficult day to try and get some of the primary care clinicians, unfortunately. However, what I would say is we've agreed that there will be follow-ups with the lead officers in terms of one-to-one session. So in terms of primary care and things like that, we would be bringing in David Heron. Obviously, we would arrange to meet with him separately. So we will pick up views. I think your points are well made around risks in terms of recruitment and retention, Alison, and that's something that we are going to reword under the capacity and infrastructure risk. Because whilst that was in there, it was more about our kind of corporate support functions rather than the risks for us in terms of recruiting staff, which is obviously huge in terms of your workforce planning. But also we've added that other dynamics in terms of the providers. And again, we're going to change the risk to highlight that under the commissioning risk, that in actual fact there's an issue in terms of providers being able to recruit and have that sustainable workforce. And I guess if those are highlighted in the risk register in that way, we can then put mitigating actions in place to try and then track progress in terms of how we're addressing some of that. But I think you're right in terms of recruitment tension. We probably need to look at new ways in terms of how we recruit people and growing our own staff, training them, getting into schools, getting into colleges, and because I think our kind of traditional recruitment, drives just we're not attracting the staff. It's something we've certainly been discussing around district nursing at the moment, where we're really struggling to attract qualified district nurses. So we're looking at, well, actually, we are going to have to take on trainees, and let's try and do something a bit different. So yeah, I think we definitely need to look at.
Yeah, there are a number of staffing areas which are really national issues going to manifesting locally. So it's it's not only us that's trying to do these, we're also in competition with other areas effectively. And again, you know, like Alison, I mean, my father's 90 and has home care, so I've seen a similar pattern of, you know, almost a different face every day turning up at the door. So that there are issues there, but hopefully we can look at that longer term. Anything else on risk register anyone wants to raise? Okay, can we note that report then? Thank you. Item, where are we? Item 5 is internal audit report. Isabel, is this yours?
It is indeed. Thank you very much and good morning everybody. So this report you've got today is the 2021 Internal Audit Annual Assurance Report. The purpose of the report is to summarise the work internal audit have undertaken over the course of the last year and to provide an overall opinion on the IJB's arrangements for risk management, governance and control based on that work. The report also comments on our compliance with the public sector internal audit standards. As you can see from section 2, I asked the IJB Audit Committee to note that sufficient internal audit work was undertaken to support a balanced assurance and that internal audit can provide substantial assurance on the IJB's arrangements for risk management, governance and control for the year to 31st March 2021. Section 3 of the report explains that the 2021 internal audit plan had 2 main assignments to be completed by the team over the course of the year. At Audit Committee in March, you noted that given the impact of COVID-19 on the IJB and on the resources available to internal audit, the plan progress had been limited. Progress to date in completing the 2021 internal audit plan is that the risk management arrangements audit's been undertaken and it's at draft report stage. The directions audit was agreed to be deferred to 21-22. So for these reasons, the 2021 assurance cannot be provided on the basis of a substantively completed internal audit plan, as it has in previous years. That said, each of the Falkirk Council and the NHS Forth Valley reports we are taking reliance from, which are at paragraphs 3.9 and 3.10 respectively, strengthens the assurance opinion. In addition, we can also fall back on a substantial assurance opinion from previous years. Taking account of these considerations and the very difficult year that we faced during 2021, it's my opinion that substantial assurance can be provided in relation to the adequacy of the arrangements. Section 4 of the report comments on our compliance with the public sector internal audit standards. These set out the principles and practices that we must comply with, and every year we're required to undertake a self-assessment against those standards. This has given reassurance that we operate in line with the standards. It was undertaken by internal audit during February of this year. There's also a 5-year external assessment, which this section last underwent during 2018, and we were found to be compliant. Finally, I'd ask the board to note the conclusions at section 5, and again, happy to try and answer any questions that you may have. Thanks.
Thanks, Isabel. I think any report for last year has the words "but COVID" kind of on it in big letters, doesn't it? It's such an unusual year. But yeah, substantial assurance is always good to have.
Yeah.
Any comments, colleagues? Questions? Robert?
Yeah, just a question. I probably should know this. Why is Falkirk Pension Fund being reviewed by the Audit Committee?
It's not been. It's been reviewed by Falkirk Council. So
Right.
It's a Falkirk Council audit, but because the systems are shared, we can take assurance from it that because everything was okay in that system that.
Right. Okay. I understand now. Thanks.
Any other points? No. We're happy to note that report then. Thank you. Item 6 then is the unaudited annual report and accounts. Gillian?
Thanks, Gordon. Yep, so this report presents the draft accounts for financial year 2021. And under the regulations, the accounts need to be with their external auditors by the 30th of June. However, we do have some flexibility, as we did last year in relation to COVID. However, I'm just sticking to the original timetables just for my own sanity. Under the regulations, there also needs to be a 3-week inspection period of the draft accounts for the public. So that period started last Friday. So the consultation's been out for a week. The financial statements themselves are comprised of a management commentary, governance statement, and the actual financial accounts themselves. So draw your attention to the management commentary, and clearly the last financial year was dominated by COVID, so it pretty much tells the story of COVID in terms of the kind of key actions that we took to respond to the pandemic. And there was a range of issues, you can see it in the actual commentary itself. In terms of our financial performance, an £11.4 million surplus was recorded. Clearly, that's an unprecedented position, and there's 3 main reasons for that. One, the impact of COVID on our planned expenditure. So it won't surprise you to know that there was a number of areas where expenditure was put on hold. So particularly around carers and actually being able to support them with short breaks, respite, housing adaptations for obvious reasons. We couldn't go into people's houses to make some of the adaptations that we needed to make. There was also some delays in recruitment across various service areas, and again, for obvious reasons due to the pandemic. The second reason is in relation to unused COVID funding itself. So we have been advised by Scottish Government to create an earmarked reserve to carry forward any unused COVID funding, and clearly we're going to need that to be carried forward to meet the ongoing costs of the pandemic. And the third reason is there was a number of late allocations issued by the Scottish Government in February and March, and that was in relation to a range of new policy commitments and also some additions to existing policy commitments. So particularly things around district nurse workforce planning, for example. The Community Living Change Fund was also created. There was also additional COVID funding, around 2.8 million, that was over and above what we originally asked for in our local mobilisation plan. So that was another late but very welcome allocation, because we will need that going into the current financial year. I would reassure the committee that we are intending to fully utilise the reserve balances in 2021-22. As I say, the ongoing costs of the pandemic are expected to continue to be significant. In terms of the governance statement, I would draw your attention to a number of items within that. Isabel's already set out that substantial assurance has been provided by the internal audit opinion, and the report sets out a number of progresses in terms of internal and external audit recommendations during 2021. There's a number of emerging governance issues during the course of the year, so that ongoing delegation of powers to the Chief Officer continued. That was something just at the very start of the pandemic we set up, and that has continued to be in place. There was also a range of enhanced governance arrangements put in place in respect to care homes, and the governance statement sets that out. There's one outstanding area in terms of the accounts themselves in relation to PPE. So as it stands at the moment, the vast majority of the PPE costs that were provided through national procurement, so NHS National Services Scotland, that's been included in their books. So they've obviously procured the PPE, incurred the costs and recorded it as such. However, we have had a very recent opinion from Audit Scotland that in fact NHS National Services Scotland were acting as an agent, so effectively the middleman, they passed it on to the health boards, and in which case we were the people that were consuming the goods, and the IGB would obviously consume their share of that good as well, so it should be recorded in our books rather than in NSS's books. So it's a bit of a late potential adjustment, and there's a meeting next week with SIPFA and LASAC who will give advice on what the IGB should do in terms of their accounts. I have to say it won't change the bottom line. What it means is we may have to record some PPE expenditure, but there'll be the corresponding funding from the Scottish Government, so it won't change the bottom line, but it just means that we'll be recording the income and the expenditure in our accounts. Potentially, as I say, we will find out more about that next Wednesday. So that's one potential change that I need to point out to the committee at this stage. In terms of the recommendations, you're asked to consider the unaudited accounts, note the public inspection period, which I say started last Friday, and also note that I would intend to submit these draft accounts to the auditors probably today, if I'm being honest.
Okay, thanks, Gillian. Yeah, I'm not sure I fully understand the accounting side of the NSS decision, but as you say, if the net is zero, then it won't affect the bottom line on the account, so that's fine. Whatever we need to do technically.
It's affected a number of things, so it's that difference between whether we're acting as an agent or a principal, and it's affected things like the £500 bonus payment for staff. So that was paid through health and social care partnerships, but we were just effectively the payment mechanism to pass it on to the providers. So actually, why would we record it in our books? So we were told to exclude that. So that advice came out quite early on, but the PPE is a relatively new one in the last few weeks, where Audit Scotland have thought actually this probably should be reflected in the books of the bodies that were actually consuming the PPE, rather than National Procurement, who simply facilitated purchasing it and distributing it. So yeah, the weird and wonderful world of technical accounting.
Okay, fine. And the other thing was the reserves position. I know I'd raised previously on a draft and asked just for a bit more explanation of that. I mean, I know our large reserves are entirely in line with probably every other IGB in the country, given that exactly the same issues of late allocation. But I was a bit concerned just how it might look on a first kind of glance at the accounts, that, you know, here's this IGB that's always crying hard up and they've got millions of pounds sitting in the bank. So thank you for adding a very clear explanation of where that came from, just to head off any inquiries we might get.
Yep.
Alison, you wanted to come in?
Yeah, it was just to ask at page, I'm not sure if it's 71 or 43, it was about the support services. And obviously we've had long conversations over many years about the support services and about the need to keep costs down, etc. But just to ask, how's that working? Obviously the services are provided free of charge as a service in kind, but is that working well?
Do you mean in terms of the corporate support services that are provided by the partners, Alison, to the...
Yeah.
There's aspects of it that's working well, but there's still a number of areas where we probably need to bolster it up. And it's previously been raised at this committee, risk management was one area, and that has been resolved since then. There probably needs to be a bit of work around finance, in terms of the support around my position, I would say. And we probably still need to do a bit of work around, I think, the planning facility. I think HR has probably been identified, and we've got support in that from both partners. But I would say planning, finance are two areas that probably do need a bit more further work. We are in the process of reviewing the integration scheme, and as part of that, it would be good to also have an agreement around corporate services, just to formalise some of those things. It would be helpful.
I think that's quite important, and as the planning aspect, especially going forward when we're thinking about the community hospital, etc., I think we really need to get that sorted out.
And I suppose the refresh of our strategic plan as well, and the support that we need to do that as well. So yeah, there's a number of big pieces of work coming up. And
then there's the little matter of National Care Service on the horizon, and getting ourselves into the right place for that to come in over the next few years.
Indeed.
Okay, any other questions or comments on the draft accounts? Nope. Okay, so these will then go to the external auditors for their scrutiny, and then we'll see what comes back.
Yep.
Okay, are we happy to note the report as it stands? Okay, item 7 then is National Audit and Inspection Reports Overview. Is this yours again, Gillian?
Yeah, it is indeed. So again, this is the regular standing agenda item, which highlights the number of reports that's been published since the last committee meeting. In terms of national reports, there was a paper by Audit Scotland following the pandemic pound. It was a very brief paper confirming that Audit Scotland will be reviewing the COVID funding and how it's been used nationally. And the paper just, as I say, a very brief 3-page paper, just sets out their approach to that. They'll consider the source of the funding, how it's been allocated and distributed, but also importantly, outcomes in terms of what it's achieved. So look forward to getting involved in that and seeing what that report's going to say. In terms of inspection reports, so you can see in the table under section 5.1 in the paper, there was 2 unannounced inspections. One has already been reported to the Clinical and Care Governance Committee, and the second one is still to be reported, so that will be on the agenda for the next meeting. I would draw your attention to the inspection that was dated the 8th of March. There's one action that will come to this group for consideration, whereas the other actions will go to the Clinical and Care Governance Committee, and that's in relation to requirement 3. Requirement 3, you may not have it in front of you, I've got a copy here, was that the provider must, by 31st of October, ensure residents' rights are upheld and they have access to adequate resources to meet their health and wellbeing needs. The service must also ensure residents have access to independent advocacy services. Now, that action had already been fulfilled and had been met. However, when they subsequently came back as part of this unannounced visit, they identified that the home was managing most people's personal allowances as the residents didn't have capacity to do it independently. In these cases, people were not operating a bank account and could not purchase goods or services online. The provider's financial systems and processes could not provide this facility. This meant people could not purchase items that were cheaper or only available online, and this put people at financial and social disadvantage. So we're having a look at our corporate appointee policy and procedures at the moment. I think this had arose actually because of COVID, obviously the shops being shut, it was kind of felt that people, online was your only option in some cases. Now for some residents, that online shopping just will not be appropriate at all, they just would not be able to manage that. But for others, it would be. So as I say, we're having a look at our entire corporate appointee policy, including procedures, and we have had some initial discussions around purchase cards that could be used. So I think it is possible for us to put something in place around this, and we would intend to use Bunbury as a pilot for that in the first instance. But as I say, I would like that policy and the proposal to come back for review from this group. So that will be the September meeting. That'll come back and see what's underway at the moment. So that's in relation to that. In terms of the other inspections, so those fortnightly inspections that are in place under the COVID legislation, there's a range there and you can see the outcomes and that they have been reported to Clinical Care Governance Committee. So I'm happy to take any questions and the recommendations were to note the content of the report.
Yeah, that sounds like a really interesting idea to pilot something in Bunbury, given it's been raised there.
Yeah.
I can't think of having heard of anything similar being done elsewhere, but it might be worth a bit of a horizon scan just to see if there have been other solutions found.
We've contacted other areas for copies of their corporate appointee policy, and the range, some are 1 page, some are full documents that are 8 pages long. So yeah, I think in terms of the care homes, it's probably more straightforward to implement. The issue is around where the corporate appointeeships are for community in the community. That's more difficult. So, but we'll work through it and we'll see if we can come up to a solution that's better for everyone.
Okay, look forward to seeing that next time around. Alison.
Yeah, regarding Bunbury, I've read the reports and some of it is a bit disappointing. And I just wonder if this is an opportunity for integration, if we couldn't have more like maybe nursing input in the home, in terms of some of the discussions that some parts of the report, it sounded almost like there was a need for more nursing input rather than care input. And I don't know if in a truly integrated team, that would just be much more holistic. It would be probably better if you had a couple of members of the staff that were actually nurses. The Southfields, I thought it was a really good report. It's an unannounced report, but again, it shows there's real pressures with young people with complex needs. There's real pressures in terms of recruitment and retention, etc. And we just need to that has to be looked at. I think that was really all I wanted to say. I was going to just add, and I'll obviously not mention the company, but my son's care place, we purchase gift cards and it works very well. It worked very well. We had to do that, and the staff have actually went and did it themselves, bought the gift cards, and then the person can actually choose things for themselves. So it actually is quite easy to do and it works really well.
Yeah, that's really good to know. As I say, I know Isabel and the finance team has been looking into it, and she thinks there is a potential solution around the cards. So that is really positive. In terms of your comments around the nursing input, Alison, I can take that back to colleagues to get an update on whether that is an issue in terms of those residents and those placements.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions or comments? Nope. We're happy to note that report then. And item 8 is the annual assurance statement, Gillian.
Thanks, Gordon. Yep, so this is the annual assurance statement, which members are asked to consider and approve today, and the intention is that it would be submitted to the IJB in September. So the report just provides a very high level summary of the business that the Audit Committee has considered, the membership and attendance and so on. And as I say, it follows the same format as last year, so happy to take any questions. But as I say, the intention would be, pending approval today, to submit to IJB in September.
Yeah, so this is effectively our annual report back to the Payment Committee, just to assure them that we're doing our job properly.
Very much, yep.
Robert?
Yeah, just under section 3.1, the composition, should we not put a finish date for Jennifer Kerr?
Yeah, it's a good point, yep. I'll update that, Robert.
Okay, any other queries, Alison?
Just I think that we're missing the extra discussion coming from having somebody else here, you know, taking Jen's place, and hopefully that'll be done soon. I mean, the time that the meeting takes doesn't reflect the amount of reading and that, etc., that goes into preparing for the meeting. But I think that having the extra person to actually look at the reports and come back with a different perspective would be really helpful.
Yeah, fair point, I'd agree with that. Any other questions or comments then? Are colleagues happy to agree that report for submission to next IJB? Okay, that's agreed, thank you. And I think that's it. That's at the end of the agenda. Is there any other business anyone wants to raise? No, Alison.
It was just as quick to say that the audit accounts was a lot of work, and thank you, Gillian. I forgot to say that at the time when I was reading, when I was that huge report, huge amount of work, and so well written, and everything. So just thank you very much, Gillian.
Thank you, Alison. I appreciate that.
Yeah, accounts is always a big job, and I'm sure there were lots of added complexities this year.
Yes, there was a few late nights, I'm not going to lie.
Okay, well, we'll see the results of that at our next meeting then. Okay, we meet next in September, so thanks everyone for their input today. We'll see you then, if not before. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank
Thank
you.
you. Bye-bye.
Bye.